Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find your way to watch or listen to this podcast. It's Omar from the Hardware Pod, and we have a familiar face on the podcast. We got Brock from Midnight Sports today. Always love talking to him about Hawaii football. We got a different topic today, but before we dive in, Brock, how's everything going?
It's going good, man. I cannot complain. Just been doing my thing. We're working on the top 100 Hawaii Warriors of all time. Something that we talked about before, obviously with Coach Jeff Rambo. But besides that, just been chilling and looking forward to talking about my alma mater, UNLV.
Yeah, for sure. And you exactly as you just said, we're not talking about Hawaii, but we're talking about a school that's on the ninth island of Hawaii, Las Vegas, Sin City. And recently they scheduled a very interesting intersectional game with a FCS opponent, one that I wrote about with a link will be in the bio, along with Brock's site, Midnight Sports Today. But they scheduled the Bryant Bulldogs out of the Big South Conference. And just a brief note, Bryant is in Rhode Island, but they're in the Big South Conference due to some conference realignment stuff. I mean, arguably that's the craziest thing about conference realignment, a school in Rhode Island being put into a conference called the Big South. But that being said, the Bryant Bulldogs scheduled this game at Allegiant Stadium on the opening Thursday called the college football season next year. And Brock, any initial thoughts on this matchup? I guess it's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is very interesting. One, touching on the whole Bryant being Rhode Island thing, at one point in time, that should have been an outlier when it came to conferences. And now, obviously, a conference realignment, that hat on your head to find the Rose Bowl, two longtime Rose Bowl participants, USC, UCLA being the Big Ten now. It's crazy now to see how that's all changing, but that's all beside the point. When it comes to UNLV, football has never been their strong suit ever in the history of the university. So in basketball, they've been a basketball school for a very long time. Obviously, the running rebels from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They still captivate the school till today. And they're in this weird spot right now. So what I see when they schedule a team like Bryant is that they're trying to get an easy win on the board, something they tried to do last year against Eastern Washington, which they ended up losing at home in overtime, just to kind of help build the resume of the program. As you talked about before on my podcast and just even on this one about conference realignment, UNLV has put itself in prime position for a move to a Power 5 program if they're able to garner that success on the field. They have a brand new facility that's like $30 million, one of the best in the Mountain West, if not the best in the Mountain West. They play in Allegiant Stadium, an NFL quality stadium. They're just looking to kind of go to the next level from what I see. UNLV is also a program there's a lot of question marks in the air right now in terms of direction. Obviously, Desiree Francois, I believe is her name, the former AD at UNLV, she left to Missouri, and she was the one that was very vocal in the hiring of Marcus Arroyo, the head coach. Now there's a new AD, Eric Harper, in, and there's a lot of rumors going around that Harper and Arroyo are at odds with each other. So I think this is also an opportunity for Arroyo to kind of boost his resume, because realistically, he needs to qualify for a bowl game in order to save his job at UNLV.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about the program for sure. I did not know that new AD was at odds with Marcus Arroyo. It is his third season. I think you can give him a pass for the 2020 pandemic season for sure. First year that team showed strides. I think they just had poor close game luck, like the Fresno State game. Of course, the UTSA game, that was a shocker as well. There's the San Diego State game. They had a string of four straight one-loss games against very quality opponents. So yeah, the program has potential for sure. I don't think Arroyo's in the hot seat this year, but they're gonna want to see progress for sure. And you mentioned the Eastern Washington game, which I guess brings up my next question too, is like, do you think as a UNLV fan, or I guess like if you were a UNLV fan, would you prefer to see the program play, FCS schools that are closer to the region? West Coast FCS schools, or are you a fan of like these intersectional matchups, like getting teams from across the country to come to Allegiant and visit Las Vegas?
So for me, I think I'm more of a fan of the latter. And the reason why is because it's a little harder to do that and also win. coming across country, being an FCS program, and then attempt to win inside Allegiant Stadium against an FBS program. And I'm all about winning at the end of the day. Quite frankly, there isn't a matchup within the West Coast and that is really ideal. Eastern Washington was probably the best one because of their high passing offense. But besides that, there's not really an exciting matchup or a historic rivalry or anything like that that I really would sink my teeth into. I'm just looking for a team that UNLV can beat and get start the season on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, so on that note too, about it being hard to travel across the country. I mean, last year in the first year that Allegiant Stadium had fans, we saw Iowa State at the time ranked number 14. I mean, early on in the season, come to Las Vegas and play against UNLV. We had Breece Hall, Brock Purdy. I mean, Charlie Kohler, you name it. I think even Chase Allen was drafted by the league from Iowa State. So I mean, you have like a program coming from across the country. Like, do you think, looking at their future schedules, it doesn't appear that UNLV is hosting as many as many Power Fives from across the country? It's mostly like Pac-12 schools that they'll be playing. That they'll be playing in at home at Allegiant Stadium. I guess, do you think that UNLV will be able to attract more Power Five opponents Power Five opponents and also name brand opponents? Because I include the Army game, I guess, as a 2024. I mean, because our Army's a national brand, being a service academy. Do you see them attracting more national brands from across the country for this sort of, I mean, especially with Allegiant Stadium, with it being a great venue and being in Las Vegas, a great tourist spot?
So it depends, especially I hate coming back to it, but with conference realignment, right? Because now Power Five teams have more of a bigger stretch across the nation. For example, maybe a bunch of Big Ten teams that have been traveling to the West Coast once or twice a year to go and play USC, UCLA. So the allure, I guess you can say, of playing in Vegas may not be there for them, right? And then if you look at the SEC, what's really in it for them? The big conferences already have that reach in terms of recruiting, so there's not really a benefit for them. They're traveling away from your fan base. I don't see that happening. So realistically, the only conferences for that could happen is obviously the Pac-12 because of location, but we quite frankly don't know where they're going to be in the next 5 to 6 years, or the Big 12, right? And obviously, UNLV went down and played UTSA, and that, of course, they're a member of the Conference USA, right?
They'll be American starting next year.
Okay, they'll be American. Gotcha. So either a team like America, the Big 12, possibly, but at the same time, what's kind of the point for you as a program to come to Las Vegas if you don't have some type of brand already built inside the city, right? You gotta go on a trip. You got to go to Las Vegas, which is already an issue if you have players that, let's just say, need a little bit more attention in terms of the off the field antics. And alongside the fact, again, it's a road game. When realistically, you could pay a program that kind of money for them to come to your program, be an easy win, so on and so forth. I don't see it happening unless UNLV builds themselves up as a marketable program. However, they are taking the right steps to do so. So maybe in the next 3 or 4 years, if they are successful at it, I could see more marquee programs coming to Las Vegas. But until then, I think Iowa State is kind of the ceiling. We might see teams of that caliber come in, but I don't think anything higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point too, especially with the Big Ten, and then them having, or with USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago on your podcast, that lore is kind of gone. And just to take it one step further, the Big Ten and SEC are tied in with the Las Vegas Bowl, so there is that opportunity every other year for either of those conferences send their teams to Las Vegas. So that's a great point to you. And also looking at another thing with future schedules, I mean, you have a LSU and USC playing at Allegiant, I think either next year or the year after. So that's that. I mean, yeah, like you said, the lore is gone of going to Las Vegas for sure. And with them being a program, I guess, that hasn't had much success, I guess you don't gain like a signature win, which, I mean, there's two sides of the coin. It's like you go to Las Vegas and you get an easy win, a nice fun trip for your fans, and that's that. And then there's also, in the strength of schedule age, with a CFP where you want you want a good quality win for your resume. I mean, I can see, excuse me, the argument going both sides as well. But I guess I want to kind of put I guess a juxtaposition with another program in a similar spot where you have Temple. You have Temple and USF where you look at Temple's future schedules and the games they've had in the past where they were able to get Notre Dame to come to Philadelphia. Now that's not a cross country game for them, but it's still a marquee opponent in a rare opportunity. One cross country game that they do have on their future schedule is 2025 against Oklahoma, where Oklahoma will visit Lincoln Financial Field to play Temple. So, I mean, I can sort of see that type of thing happening still. I guess those type of games happening still for programs like UNLV, Temple, and not to mention USF got a 2-for-1 with Alabama. And I mean, even though USF is on the trajectory to build an on-campus stadium, I do think that one will be held at Raymond James Stadium because it is Alabama. So with that, I mean, there's two sides of the coin, I think, with what you said. But I mean, you made some really great points.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it could happen. Obviously, if Temple's able and USF are able to get these kind of marquee games, but then you also got to think about who's going there. Notre Dame, obviously being the Catholic brand of football in America, they're going to go to a place like Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, have a really high population. There's a obviously really high population of Catholics on the East Coast, so it makes sense for them. Oklahoma, that's an interesting one. Obviously, because they're a program that's right now in this weird kind of place. Obviously, when they scheduled the game, this was before when they were more stable place with Lincoln Riley. I'm not saying they're unstable before all the OU fans come at me. I'm just saying is they're going through a change. I think a change for the better, but a change. So it could be interesting to see if they transition the recruiting strategy from the East Coast, where Brent Venables obviously had a stronghold at Clemson, to coming back to the West. Maybe that could be a possibility for UNLV. I just don't see it happening because when they finally go to the SEC, it just doesn't make sense, in my opinion, for them to kind of come to Vegas. I'm thinking that maybe a team like, excuse me, maybe a team like Oklahoma State, maybe a team like Baylor, maybe a team like Kansas State, right? Then that kind of like Midwestern, Mid-Southern region, those are the teams that are going to come to UNLV. Those are teams that can put up 9-10 wins a year, but they don't have that great historic prestige to the program yet. That's something that I could see them doing to kind of build on that in their West Coast recruiting strategy. I was more talking about the bigger programs, the Alabamas, the Auburns, the Georgias, the Ohio States, right? Especially in the Big Ten. And before, if USC, UCLA wasn't in the Big Ten, yeah, I could see that happening a lot, or just a game in Vegas. Now, with that whole USC, UCLA connection, I just don't see that happening. And quite frankly, I think we're all kind of waiting for the ball to drop on Notre Dame to see if they join the conference before anything else happens. Again, unless UNLV can, like you mentioned, because it's all about strength of schedule for the college football playoff, unless UNLV can be a marquee win sometime down the road, I just don't see those top programs coming to Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's a good point too. About like you said, Iowa State is ceiling with like those with potential for like those other Big 12 programs, the leftovers, from the OU and Texas realignment, coming to Las Vegas for sure. So we'll see in the coming years, especially how I guess with scheduling as well. I know like with realignment, one of the things that a lot of people aren't talking about is how much weight BYU had to shed since they're joining the Big 12 in terms of their future conference, non-conference schedules, and a lot of the casualties were great home and home series with a good group of five programs, with very solid group of five programs that BYU had throughout the years. Because they always played a tough independent slate, especially with those group of five programs. So that is something to see in the future. I guess going back to Bryant. Do you think their fans will show out? I guess typically down here in Las Vegas, I think looking back at the first year at Allegiant Stadium for UNLV with fans at least, the Iowa State game was by far the most attended home game for the program. I think over 35,000 fans went to that game. And I don't know if that was more excitement among local UNLV fans that they had the number 14 team coming to the country or coming to Las Vegas, or if that was fans from Ames, Iowa, coming out in full force for an excuse to go to Vegas. So, do you think Bryant fans will show out for this excuse to go to Sin City?
Well, definitely was more of the Ames fans coming out to Las Vegas to show up for the team. They were nationally ranked. They got a chance to go to Allegiant Stadium, and they came out in full force. I do think that Bryant fans will show up. I mean, realistically, what other road marquee matchups are they going to have in the next 3 to 4 years, or the 3 to 4 years prior, for which you can say, yeah, I want to go visit that? It's always probably going to be one per season. This is the only ability for them to come to Las Vegas and get an affordable ticket at best to Allegiant Stadium, because Raiders tickets are absolutely ridiculous. They have an opportunity that when you have a school like Bryant, your fan base isn't huge, but the people in the fan base are very closely connected to the program, whether they went to Bryant, the kids go to Bryant, Bryant was just like the hometown team, whatever it is. So I can see a fair amount of fans come. It's not going to be 30,000, right? I would say at most maybe 5,000. But I do think that those who can come will go, just because of the prestige of going to Allegiant Stadium, having this close support that they do for the program, and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, not a huge program or school in general, but again, a rare opportunity, a once in a lifetime type of trip. And I mean, yeah, exactly. Seeing your team, your little old team from the Big South Conference, that was just in the Northeast Conference, probably the weakest FCS conference in Allegiant Stadium, where Derek Carr and now Devontae Adams are playing in. I mean, it's a sight to see. I would say to Las Vegas locals, residents, just be careful, because Bryant fans are scrappy, as we saw in the NEC championship game, the NEC basketball championship game, the infamous fight in the stands, which I thought was hilarious. I think I'm a proponent. I'm a proponent for fans fighting in the stands. I think it's hilarious. I just think it's funny.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you're not the one you punch a stone at, it is definitely hilarious. I mean, I remember when I watched the Raiders and the Chargers play. I know just two Raiders fans. I don't know, probably hammered. But I think that they were hammered. It was a Raiders game, and they were and there's play going on in the field, and all we care about is the fight in the stands. There are people in the boxes halfway leaning out the window just to watch. So fights at sporting events are always fun to witness. It's just it's weird for UNLV right now, because where Bryant may have a small fan base, they're very passionate about the program. UNLV has failed to establish a fan base behind, besides obviously the diehards. And I think when you schedule a team like Bryant, you're trying to give them something, but you're also trying to recruit more fans as well. If you can come out, especially with the new quarterback Harrison Bailey, the transfer from Tennessee, if you can come out and you can be splashy, you can put up 55 points, that's going to make people come back for week 2, week 3, week 4. And if they kind of build off that momentum, you can establish kind of a fan base in this new era. I think that's the whole point of also scheduling a team like Bryant. Kind of give them a showcase of what the team can do and kind of build the excitement for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point for sure. I will say, I didn't watch much UNLV ball. I did watch their weeknight games against San Diego State, Fresno State as well, and the Iowa State game. But I mean, there's a common meme about Marcus Arroyo had Justin Herbert throwing bubble screens at 10 o'clock Eastern. So hopefully Arroyo's play calling doesn't slow down Harrison Bailey, which I don't think will be the case. Honestly, I mean, I think that's just I don't know. I don't know. You're a Chargers fan, maybe you have more of an opinion on that. So I'll just leave that to you.
Yeah, so obviously I didn't study enough with Justin Herbert's college tape when I did my evaluation on him, because I didn't think he was going to be a bust. I also didn't think he was going to be great. I thought that the Tua was obviously going to be QB1. Joe Burrow, he deserved to be the first overall pick, but the big question for Tua wasn't could he do it, was he just going to be healthy enough to do it, right? And I remember I had a Broncos fan that's a friend of mine say that Justin Herbert is Paxton Lynch. Obviously, he was wrong. Yeah, I know. He's a special friend of mine. But looking back at what he did at Oregon, I look at the Rose Bowl. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. They were just literally calling RPOs and read options the whole game. And unfortunately, that's why I kind of fear for Tyler Van Dyke down in Miami, who's looking to be one of the top gunslingers, is that Cristobal offense is going to you know, hold him back, to say the least, right? And that's the big question. Was it Arroyo or was it Cristobal at Oregon that kind of held Justin Herbert back? Who knows? All I know is that when Herbert was at Oregon, they should have been in the college football playoffs for 2 years. All right, they should have been his senior and his junior year. You don't have a talent like that, and don't make the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? But that's a whole nother topic. When it comes to Marcus Arroyo at UNLV, there's a lot of question marks, and I do believe he is on the hot seat already because the new AD probably wants to bring in his own kind of face for the program. The Fertitas are involved, especially this era of NIL money, so they are going to spend money on a winner. Marcus Arroyo did take a lot of strides in his second year, but he also had a lot of staff turnover as well. New offensive coordinator this year, new defensive coordinator this year, a bunch of replacements for the rest of the position coaches. You have a new quarterback, and at the same time, your predecessor, Tony Sanchez, right, the old Bishop Gorman head coach, he didn't win a lot, but he won the important ones. He was 3-2 in the battle for the Fremont Cannon, right? As a UNLV fan, that is the only game I care about. Quite frankly, I don't care about a bowl game. I don't care about conference championship. I should, but the only thing I care about is that cannon, right? And the cannon is blue for 2 straight years because Marcus Arroyo couldn't get the job done. If he loses another game against UNR, especially the fact that UNR has a new head coach, right? And Jay Norvell is all at Colorado State. If he loses again to, I believe, Ken Wilson, who a lot of people are saying is not that great of a coach, I mean, I just don't know where you go from there. You have a star quarterback. You have a receiving core that's getting a lot of high praise. Obviously, you did lose the Chuck Wagon, Charles Williams, UNLV's greatest rusher ever. But at the same time, if you're running that scheme, you should be able to get some yards on the ground. Like I said, UNLV has a lot of question marks right now, and I do think if Marcus Arroyo doesn't win the cannon or qualifies for a bowl game, I think he's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I overlook the thing about the cannon for sure, about the Nevada Reno rivalry. That's a great point. I mean, you look back to 2021, situation close to me. Kenny Matalolo with Navy. I certainly thought after 2 years with the triple option offense looking as lackluster as it has been, with almost no signs of improvement, I thought he would have been fired if he didn't beat Army, this past year. So that's a great point about rivalries as well. And I mean, yeah, you mentioned the star power the UNLV's had. I mean, of course, you mentioned the transfer quarterback Harrison Bailey this year. But I mean, Charles Williams is an amazing back, for sure. And I won't say his talents were misused, but I mean, you kind of see that, I guess, UNLV's system are leaning more on its run game because they've had great runners. It's just not just Charles Williams, like Lexington Thomas and Armani Rogers, great players, great runners too that they've had. So we will see, I guess, with the system. That's a good point. I mean, if I guess if it isn't a blowout or there's not a lot of points, I guess fans might be restless, after that Bryant game for sure. So that's a storyline to watch. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Lexington Thomas, I mean, I want to give him his flowers. That dude was absolutely electric in open space. And then going back to kind of Tony Sanchez, again, did it with a lot, but he won the ones that, like, what you would expect and the ones that counted. He's the first person to ever win a road game in the SEC for UNLV, right? To beat Vanderbilt. He went down to San Diego State and basically took out Rocky Long's career, essentially, when they went down and they beat SDSU. Then he goes and he wins the final game at Sam Boyd Stadium against San Jose State. He gets fired the week before his season finale against UNR in Reno, in the snow. And you know what they do? They win, right, in overtime. And then they get into a big fight, which UNLV wins that too, right? So, and I may be biased on that, but they were whooping their behind. That's beside the point. Then you come to 2020, it's the pandemic year, right? There's a lot of player turnover in that year, and they get smoked by Norvell and Reno in the opener at Allegiant, right? The first ever game you're gonna get smoked by a rival, that hurt. Last year, they go up to Reno. I think it's like 35-0 by halftime. It was a disaster. If you get blown out like that again against UNR, I just don't see where is the future. What's the allure of coming to the program? You can put out all the bells and whistles, but if you can't win the critical games, you're like gonna be like Texas versus Oklahoma, right, in Red River. Like what's the point? Now you get money to go play in Texas. But besides that, like what is the allure for people to come to UNLV? If not, I do think they make a coaching change. I could see UNLV spending that extra dough through the Fertitas to kind of bring in one of those coaches that you wouldn't think would come to a program like UNLV. I mean, it was far fetched, but I remember Urban Meyer was linked to UNLV several seasons ago when he was just a commentator. So maybe a name of a tier lower than that can come to UNLV. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, for sure. I guess you mentioned names like someone that you wouldn't expect. I mean, first name comes up like Bobby Petrino, who's doing great things with Missouri State, completely changed the face of that program. So in FCS. So yeah, I mean that's interesting for sure. I mean that like I guess like Marcus Arroyo being on the hot seat is definitely a storyline in the Mountain West, and I guess the entire group of five as well, which is one. Well, I mean, we'll look out for starting with yeah, I guess starting with week one. But as for next year, we'll see if he's there for the Bryant game, and you know, whether it's the start of a new era or the continuance of the upward trajectory of UNLV. Only time will tell. So yeah, I think that's all I got for this one, Brock. Anything final you want to say?
Yeah, no, I just want to wish all the boys at UNLV the best of luck. I know they've been playing and training very hard. I had the opportunity to take a look at their program, close eyes, both as a student and then also just as a football fan. I do think that they've done all the right things outside of football to build a strong program. I do think that what they did with the whole Marcus Arroyo contract thing and going and getting a guy of his caliber, being the OC of Oregon, was a step in the right direction. Realistically, they haven't had a coach of that prestige since John Robinson back in the early 2000s. And they did some really great things. Obviously, they had Bobby Hawk from Montana for a little while. They went to a bowl game, so that was kind of cool. Tony Sanders and such. I just think other Group of 5 schools should kind of look at what UNLV is doing in terms of how they're going to make the jump to the next level. Because they've, like I said, they've done everything right. Start with the facility, moved into a brand new stadium, and well, more just take advantage of their surroundings. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, just as a fan, I'm really excited to see Go Rebels, and I really hope we get the cannon back.
Yeah, so I mean, since you're a UNLV fan, I'll be rooting for the Rebels too as well. I mean, from now on, except for October 19th, 2024, when the Academy comes to Sin City. So yeah, I guess with that, this has been great, Brock. Really appreciate it. And until next time, peace, love, and soul.